Okay, good deal. So there's the PR for the talk. So, history of historians, where we talk about the backgrounds of those historians, local historians, who have authored nonfiction books over the past 50 years, because I know most of these folks over the past 50 years. And Louisville has had dozens, if not hundreds, of history books written over the years, and so I'm not going to be able to mention them all, but I hope not to bore you to death either with a lot of these names and people. And so why should the background of those who write books, especially history books, be very important? Well, because once incorrect information is printed in a book, it becomes gospel. People, us historians, in fact, we would look at it and say, oh, well, that's... But then we'll go in and look at our, when we do peer review and things of that nature, we'll find out, well, geez, it's in the book, but that's not what it actually happened. And so we historians, whenever we're doing books or articles, written a book on the profession. Award recognition. Have you received local, state, or national design awards? What about civic awards? Have you participated in Rotary or other community organizations where you've assisted those groups and received recognition? Have you been on any committees, best practices, technical? Of course, lecturing and presentations at regional and national conferences are very important, and we encourage you to do that. That's one way of getting your ripple effect out. Or have you been in leadership positions, not only nationally, but state or locally? So these are several of the categories in which you can show how you have gone beyond just your own career goals, but have advanced the profession in other ways. Fellowship is broken down into 6 categories or objects. These objects are such as number one object focuses on the design aspect of architecture. Object 2 focuses on the technical side of architecture. Object 3 deals with those who have been involved in organizations or led various groups such as CSI or the AIA. So that's more of a leadership object, number 3. Object 4 is for those who have not been in private practice but been in public service or government or related industry organizations. Object 5 talks about being of ever-increasing service to society. Have you been involved in any volunteer or pro bono projects that have improved your community? And Object 6 is oriented more towards educators, academic research, those architects who have not been in private practice or in the organizations, but been more on the educational side of architecture. Why become a fellow? It is definitely a spotlight and feature of your career and your legacy, your national influence on the profession. Only 3% of architects are elevated to the College of Fellows, and thus it is a very select group of architects that merit this distinctive accolade for their career. It's a highly prized designation and honor. And with fellowship, it gives you more heightened involvement in the profession for future leadership. The first thing you may want to do if you're considering to become a fellow is to click on this website, aia.org, Design Excellence Awards Fellowship. And on that website you'll find a lot of various things that can assist you in preparing for fellowship. I always recommend that on the menu page there that you select the examples of successful applications and look at the various objects that other architects have put together for their fellowship. These are great examples and help guide you
in putting together your own submittal for FAIA. So definitely get on this website at the outset and start clicking around and learning from how others have gone about becoming a fellow. AIA Kentucky and AIA Indiana wants to assist you in your fellowship application. We have what's called Mentorship Zoom conference calls every third Monday of the month that provides guidance and feedback. And you can just listen in on these conference calls. You do not have to be submitting this current year. You may submit in a year or two or further out. But you may just want to listen in to just see how others are going about the process and get some tips about how to put together your application. Speaking of applications, we have a mentorship application that we can send to you that helps you start to organize your career portfolio in advance of your FAIA application. So contact us to get this. We can email this to you and help you start organizing how to go about your application. Once you are a fellow, there are various ways that you can continue participating, such as the Latrobe Prize for Research, grants, fellowship grants, mentoring students and young architects, continuing your contributions to architecture as well as society. This is a list of the current FAIA members in Kentucky, and if you do submit to become a fellow, we hope that we can add your name to this list in the future. If you are honored to be a fellow, you are invited to attend the investiture ceremony, which typically is held at the National AIA Convention each year. It's always held in a very fun city to go to attend, such as recent ceremonies have been in San Francisco, Boston, Washington, D.C., and Orlando, and Chicago. To find out more and to contact for that application, email me, Steve Weiser, at weiserfaia@outlook.com, or Michael Jacobs at michaeljacobs701@gmail.com. We are most happy to assist you in your fellowship application, and we look forward to future FAIAs in the state of Kentucky. Thank you for listening to this presentation, and we hope to hear from you in the near future. Org Design Excellence Awards Fellowship. You need to click on that and start sort of going through the various categories there. I always recommend people to go through the examples of successful applications to get an idea of those objects that I was just talking about. Go into those various objects and see which of those portfolios of previous successful submissions sort of meet up with what you have done. Kind of use that as a guide and a reference point for your application. AIA Kentucky and Indiana have Zoom sessions, conference calls, on the third Monday of each month to provide guidance and feedback. These are very important. We help you to identify which object you may want to consider. We look at your portfolio and try and attempt to focus and highlight your best strengths for submittal for FAIA. And you do not have to submit to participate in these Zoom sessions. You may want to submit in a year or two from now, and so you may just want to listen in to see what the process is about and how to go about doing it. So we try to use these mentorship sessions to make your submittal the best it can be going for fellowship. Again, third Monday of the month. AIA Kentucky and Indiana also have this form here that we can send to you to help you start organizing your submittal process. Once you are in FAIA, here are some of the things that you can get involved in. Following that, the Latrobe Prize, fellowship grants, mentoring of students and young architects. You can continue your contributions to the profession as well as society. These are the current FAIA members in Kentucky. And should you be fortunate to be elevated, you get to get invited to the ceremony, the investiture ceremony. It's typically held in association with the National AIA Convention. It's been in San Francisco, Orlando, Washington, D.C., Boston, various high-profile cities, and it's just a wonderful ceremony for fellowship. To find out more, again, this has been more of a 10,000-foot view of the process. But to get down into more details, you can email me, Steve Weiser, at weiserfaia@outlook.com, or Michael Jacobs at michaeljacobs701@gmail.com. We most want to assist you with this process and make sure you put your best foot forward when submitting for FAIA. Thank you for listening to this brief overview, and hope to hear from you in the near future. Okay, so there's my bio there. Everyone hopefully is familiar with that. And today we're going to be discussing notable couples of Kentucky. I had called it famous couples of Kentucky, but there's several folks here that aren't as famous as you might think, so I've included them. But this is in honor of Valentine's Day, which is upcoming, of course. I want to start out with the couple that is on our state flag. We'll start off with those two folks here. And I'm not sure if you've given much thought as to the design of the state flag. I really hadn't, so I prepared this talk. But anyways, the two people that are depicted there, the one in the buckskin outfit is supposedly Daniel Boone, and the other one is some guy named Dick Tate Boone. T-A-T-E-B-O-O-N, Tate Boone. Supposedly they were friends back in those days. I did a Google search of Dick Tate Boone and nothing popped up. I looked in the Kentucky Encyclopedia, there was nothing about him there, so I'm not sure if someone's just picked this name out of thin air or what. But anyway, but they are representative of individuals, Daniel Boone and this other person. And as you can see, the emblem has changed over the years. Let's start off with perhaps the most famous couple of Kentucky, Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln.
They were just here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I had some performers here. So anyways, today is his birthday, February 12th, 200 years ago. He had 1 year of formal education. He was just 1 inch taller than I am, believe it or not. I'm 6'3", he's 6'4". He liked to go down to the courthouse and listen to the legal arguments. He liked politics, Henry Clay, Zachary Taylor. He was a congressperson back in the late 1840s. He actually ran for the Senate several times. Here's Mary Todd. She was from Lexington. And she was very well educated, 12 years of education. She moved to Springfield, Illinois, where she met Abe there in 1839. She dated both Stephen Douglas and Abraham Lincoln, and was a good friend with Henry Clay, which is one reason why Abe Lincoln liked her, because they were both Clay aficionados. And she was somewhat short, about 1 foot 2 inches shorter than Abe at 5'2". She was fluent in French and a very good dancer. So contrary to popular belief, Mary Todd was very well educated, and she wasn't as insane as some people have tried to make her out to be over the years. But of course, her husband being assassinated probably would have sent anyone into some sort of mental
crisis. But anyways, there they are. Now then, Abraham Lincoln also had a very good friend named Joshua Fry Speed. They met on April 15th, 1837 over in Springfield, Illinois, where Joshua Speed, he owned a general store. Lincoln came in there, wanted to buy a bunch of stuff. He couldn't do it because he didn't have the money, but Speed gave him credit for that, gave him an allowance, and so they became very good friends. And then when Speed moved back to Louisville to take over his father's plantation, Lincoln came here, left Springfield, came to Louisville in August of 1841 to meet his good friend Speed. And Joshua Fry Speed was married to Fanny Speed, who's depicted there. They are both buried in the Henning family plot at Cave Hill. That's Henning, Henning family plot, Fanny Henning Speed. And the reason for that is they never had any children. Fanny and Joshua never had children, and so there was no need to buy a family plot, and so they were buried in the Henning family plot. A couple other folks, Thomas Jefferson and George Rogers Clark, very good friends. They were born in the same county in Virginia, near Charlottesville, Virginia. And of course, Thomas sent George here to this area to protect the Falls of the Ohio during the Revolutionary War. And I would suspect sometime back then, Thomas may have sent a letter to George saying, name the town here for King Louis XVI, for he funded the American Revolution, King Louis XVI did. And so that's why we're named Louisville. But perhaps that happened. Thomas suggested to George to name this town Louisville. Now then, George Rogers Clark had a brother named William Clark, and William Clark tag teamed with Meriwether Lewis on the Lewis and Clark expedition to the northwest portion of the Louisiana Purchase that Thomas Jefferson had bought from France. Yeah, it was from France, get that straight. And then, there's a statue over in southern Indiana that depicts William Clark and Meriwether Lewis coming together to form the Corps of Discovery, which went into the Northwest Expedition. A lot of people thought that started and ended in St. Louis. Not exactly. It started and ended here in Louisville, or Clarksville, just across the river. The Hill Sisters and the Happy Birthday song, which I think you all probably sing on a regular basis here, I would think.
Yes.
It is, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, it's the most popular song in the world. It's the most sung song in the world. So here's more about Patty and Mildred Hill, who authored that song. They wrote a song called Good Morning to You that they adapted to Happy Birthday to You for one of their friends. Here are the birth dates for Mildred Hill, June 27th, 1859, and her sister Patty, March 27th, 1868. They lived near Anchorage, but yet they went up to the little loom house area to sing the song for their friend. Patty was a kindergarten teacher, which I've been reprimanded to say she's an early childhood educator. And then Mildred was a musician. And so that's where they first sung the song up there on the Kenwood Hill near Iroquois Park. This is their grave sites at Cave Hill Cemetery, very sort of plain, basic. But even if you were here on, March 27th, 28th of 1868, which would have been her birthday, you would not know it because there is no birth date on their headstones. It just has the year. It's kind of ironic that...
Right?
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, they don't even if you were there on their birth date, you couldn't see the birthday because you wouldn't know it because there is no date there. So here, does anyone here today have a birthday? We'd sing it, no birthdays today.
Not today.
Not today.
Not today.
But I do have a birthday, yeah.
But it's coming up on the There was a copyright on it that used to go to the restaurants. They would sing some offbeat version of the song to get around the copyright. Now that is voided and you can sing whatever you want with this song. Next is the Caldwell Sisters. This is their gravesite in Cave Hill Cemetery. Here's their names and their information. They inherited their money from their dad. Their dad was William Shakespeare Caldwell. He owned a lot of natural gas companies in the Midwest. And back in those days, back in the mid-1800s, natural gas were sort of the electrical system. They lit the lights, the stoves, the furnaces, everything was gas related, so they were pretty wealthy. And if you look here on their memorial, you see these little flames on either end, and that was a symbol for the natural gas and where they got their money at. And more about the Caldwell Sisters here and how they came about. They left money and they helped build things. They helped fund the Catholic University in Washington, D.C. There's actually a building there now called the Caldwell Hall, in memorial to them. And then their father named St. Mary's and Elizabeth Hospital, gave money for that. Used to be located down at 12th Magnolia. Of course, now it's out off of, Teller Boulevard,
Yep.
Bluegrass Avenue, sort of in the south end of Louisville. And they also owned a lot of property in Louisville. Where Bowman Field is today, they owned all of that land. And then they owned a lot of land where Shelby Park neighborhood is. So they're very wealthy individuals, the Caldwell Sisters were. I've always liked this monument at Cave Hill Cemetery. It's called the Shuttleworths. It's for James and Moni Shuttleworth. Very classical design, and I'm like, going, who are the Shuttleworths? So I thought I'd do a, let's see, I'll show you more. There's James and Moni's grave sites. So I thought I'd do like every other modern researcher. I Googled them to find out who they are. And the first thing that popped up was Titanic. So that got my attention. Well, why are they on the Titanic? So James Shuttleworth was over in Europe buying clothing for his clothing store in downtown Louisville. And he was coming back to America, but he wasn't on the Titanic. He was on the Carpathia, which was the recovery ship of the Titanic. The Carpathia is the one that picked up all the survivors from the Titanic. And then James Shuttleworth gave money to some of the widows there on board the ship. This is the Satterwhite Memorial in Cave Hill Cemetery. It's the most picturesque grave site there. It's the largest grave site. It's 1/3 of an acre. As you know, we have a lot of famous people buried at Cave Hill: Muhammad Ali, George Rogers Clark, Colonel Sanders. But the Satterwhites have the largest in area grave site. And here's who's buried there. We have Florence and her husband Preston. So who are the Satterwhites, and why do they have the largest, most picturesque grave site in Cave Hill? Well, here's a little brief description of it. This is at the Speed Art Museum. That's a marble bust of Preston Polk Satterwhite. But if you read this little description, what it basically says is Preston Polk Satterwhite got his money the old-fashioned way. He married it. So let's talk about his wife, Florence Brokaw Martin. She was previously married a guy by the name of James Martin. James Martin, pretty generic name, but you would know his business partner. His business partner was John D. Rockefeller in Standard Oil. So James Martin was in the Standard Oil business along with John D. Rockefeller. Unfortunately for James Martin, he met an untimely end in an automobile accident up in New York City, and his widow, Florence, was comforted by the family physician. Who might be the family physician? Yeah, Preston. And they lived happily ever after on James Martin's money, as it states here. They traveled Europe extensively, gathered a lot of sculptures and tapestries. If you go to the Satterwhite Gallery there at the Speed Art Museum, you see all their great stuff. I've been telling the Speed for some time they should rename the gallery the Martin Gallery, because that's where all the money came from. But anyway, so that's why the Satterwhites have such a large gravesite at Cave Hill Cemetery. Very picturesque. By the way, this building or sculpture there was based on Marie Antoinette's Temple of Love in Versailles, France. How do we say Versailles in Kentucky?
Versailles.
That's right. Okay, besides Preston and Florence, there is a third person buried on this gravesite. It's 1/3 of an acre, very large. There's only one other person buried there. Who might that be? You might think it would be a family member, right?
Yeah, it's like somebody's mother.
Well, it's kind of close. It's the family maid, Elizabeth Wake. She was from England. And when you're at the Satterwhite, if you compare all the dates, you'll notice that Florence, the wife, was 10 years the senior of Preston. She was 10 years older than Preston. She was what we would call a cougar. And but Elizabeth and Preston were about the same age. So I'll let you all put 2 and 2 together with the family gossip as to what might have been going on here. But anyway, someone said that if Elizabeth had passed away first, that she would not be on this gravesite. Florence would not have allowed her to be buried here. Anyway. Okay, moving on. Colonel Sanders and John Y. Brown, very famous couple, very famous business couple of Kentucky, because John Y. Brown purchased Kentucky Fried Chicken from the Colonel. But here I put together all of these dates here. Colonel Sanders had 23 different jobs in his lifespan.
Wow.
And he did not finish grade school. And he was not from Kentucky. He was from Henryville, Indiana, which is north of Louisville. And he was not a military colonel. He was actually a Kentucky colonel. So, and then he sold KFC to John Y. Brown for $2 million back in, when he was 73 years old. That was back in 1964 is when he sold it. That $2 million today would be worth about $16 million. And there's over 19,000 KFCs all over the world in 115 different countries. So a lot of things there related. And some of you may know that the first KFC was down there in Corbin, Kentucky. What really spurred KFC creation was when I-75 was built, and it took all of the business from the Colonel's motel and gas station that he owned there in Corbin. So when they built I-75, the Colonel's like, well, now what do I do? That's when he went into the chicken business full time. More about the Colonel there. And the Colonel was married to Claudia Sanders. Claudia was his second wife. Claudia also was the kitchen manager for the chicken area there. So that's how he met Claudia. She was not too certain about his first wife. Okay, and then here's their gravesite at Cave Hill Cemetery. Okay, and then John Y. Brown, he went on, after buying KFC, went on and became governor of Kentucky between 79 and 83 there. And he married Miss America in 1971, Phyllis George Brown. There's some images of them there. Very popular couple back in the 70s and 80s. Phyllis George Brown was also on the NFL. She was a commentator, an analyst.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, she was very popular back in the 70s, 80s. I'm not sure when she ended her NFL commentating, but she was one of the originals. And then we have another Governor Miss America connection. Heather French Henry, Steve Henry. Heather French was Miss America in 1999. And Steve Henry was Lieutenant Governor between 95 to 2003.
We had Heather come out here a couple of years ago.
Oh, wow.
For our vets. She's a very big supporter of veterans.
Yeah, she's very big in the VA and veterans health. Denny and Susan Sweeney Crum. Of course, Denny Crum, and all of his banners there at Yum Arena. I think he went to his, 6 Final Fours, and he won the national championship twice, very popular. Some of you may know that he's buried in Cave Hill Cemetery next to Muhammad Ali, but if you go there you would not know it because his headstone is not up yet. Denny died, I think, in May of 2023, several years ago, and the headstone was on a boat coming from India through the Red Sea up into the Mediterranean. I forget the whole logistics of it, but it was in the Red Sea when the Houthi rebels torpedoed it and sank the ship, so his headstone is at the bottom of the Red Sea, and they had to order a new headstone, which has yet to be installed. Here's an infamous marriage. Robert Worth Bingham to Mary Keenan Flagler. Mary Flagler was originally married to Henry Flagler. Some of y'all may have heard of him. He helped develop Florida. He put in all the railroads and developed Florida into what it is today. And he was also a business partner to John D. Rockefeller. And when he died, when Henry Flagler died, he left his wife Mary a fortune at the time, in 1913, of $100 million, which in today's money would have been about $2 billion. Well, then in 1916, she remarried to Robert Worth Bingham, Bingham being from Louisville, and he was a college classmate of Mary's brother. And then she passed away in 1917, and Bingham inherited all of that money, and he ended up buying the Courier-Journal and a lot of the other media empire here in Louisville. So anyways, there's a lot of information out there on the internet if you want to read more about this. A lot of interesting stories about how all this came together, but I won't delve into those issues. But anyways, but that's how the Binghams and the Courier-Journal came together. Also about the Courier-Journal, it was formed by Walter Halderman. He was a publisher of the Courier newspaper, and then George Prentice, who was the publisher of the Journal. They came together in 1868 to form the Courier-Journal. I always like to talk about my architectural brethren, Charles Clark and Arthur Loomis. They designed a lot of the signature buildings in Louisville, landmarks. Levy Brothers, which is now Old Spaghetti Factory, the Conrad Caldwell House, the Science Center, several Carnegie Libraries, the Speed Art Museum. They did a lot of landmarks here locally. Charles Clark never married, but Arthur married Carrie Loomis. This is their headstone in Cave Hill. And then Arthur also had a twin sister, Alice. So they're all right there together. Hilaric and Bradsby, which formed Louisville Slugger, another famous couple of Louisville that we still talk about. And in Cave Hill Cemetery, Louis Rogers Pete Browning, who really sort of was the instigator for the bath, he's buried there. And on his headstone, it talks about how Louisville Slugger came about. And what it says is that Louis Rogers Pete Browning broke a bat one day at a game. A young John Hilaric was up in the stands that day, went down after the game and told Pete Browning, I can make you a bat that won't break, and they've been hitting Louisville Sluggers ever since. So is that a true story or not? What's the actual story of this? Oops, I missed one there someplace, but anyways, I'll go back. Here's the actual story from what I understand. So I was doing some research on this, and I looked up Frank Bradsby. He was from Illinois, and there's a little biography out there on him. One of his relatives wrote a book on him. And in the book it says that, according to Frank Bradsby, Browning came to the factory and ordered the bat. He did not break one, he ordered the bat, according to Bradsby. So I'll let you decide whether or not he broke a bat or ordered a bat.
Tall tales are better.
One of them makes a tale better, yes. David Jones and Wendell Cherry. They purchased a senior living facility back in the early 1960s that turned into Humana, multi-billion-dollar company based here in Louisville.
Which is now for sale?
Yeah.
Yeah, the building is, yes, that's correct.
Spirit Halloween will be in there soon.
But they both did, besides Humanity, they did a lot of other great civic things. Wendell Cherry pretty much responsible for the Kentucky Center for the Arts getting built, and then David Jones with the Parklands of Floyd's Fork, 4,000-acre park out beyond the Snyder Freeway. This is Wendell Cherry's gravesite in Cave Hill Cemetery. He unfortunately died of a brain tumor at the age of 54, I think, how young he was. And then this is David and Benny Jones. They both passed away within 1 month of each other in 2019. Yeah, it's very sad. But anyways, I knew both of them fairly well. I worked for Humana for a number of years and got to know them. They were great folks. Muhammad and Lonnie Ali, great love story. This is Muhammad's childhood home. And of course, the story about him learning to fight in order to find the people that stole his bicycle. He rode his bicycle from his home all the way down to the gym when he was learning boxing. Here's some career highlights of Muhammad Ali. Some more photographs. He loved being photographed, as we all know. And then, of course, the Muhammad Ali Center there down on the waterfront of Louisville. His funeral perhaps was the largest ever in the city's history, back in June of 2016. And this is his grave site in Cave Hill. Now, Muhammad is buried sort of untraditionally. He's buried parallel to the roadway. Most of the grave sites in Cave Hill are perpendicular to the roadway. He's also turned on his side, and he's facing Mecca in the a Muslim tradition. So all Muslims must be buried facing Mecca, is how that is. So that's how he's buried. By the way, I failed to mention, Colonel Sanders was buried the traditional way. He was not cremated, or else he would be extra crispy. You may have heard me say that before. So yeah, he was traditionally buried. I love this monument at Cave Hill, this dancing couple, as we call it. It's Jack Zehnder, who passed away a few years ago, and his wife Jean. He named her Geranium, is what his flower, if you will. But they love to dance, and thus, if you see, this is the mausoleum that he's buried in. I take it I don't have whether or not she's still alive. We don't know, but the dancing couple is right adjacent there. This is another different couple. This is a mother. This is the mother, and this is her son. I don't have too much information on them. I do know that when this statue arrived at Cave Hill, the mother got up next to it, and there was a perfect image of her standing there. The son passed away. He was a late teenager or early 20s. He was a young person when he unfortunately died. And they're holding swords, and they have wings on, and the reason for that is they're there to fight evil spirits in the afterlife. So it's kind of interesting.
Looks like a your grave site with little white stuff.
Yeah, pretty much. Except for I being a Superman costume.
This is kind of a sad sight, but kind of joyous the way they did it. Catherine Torp and Matthew Falk, they were teenagers when they passed away in a tragic car accident. I think it was out in Kansas when they had the accident, and their parents created this beautiful memorial to them at Cave Hill.
Wow.
The Gheens family. Anyone here was a school teacher or in the school system? No one school. Well, anyways, if you don't know what the Gheens Foundation is, I'll discuss that. So the Gheens Foundation was created in 1957 by Edwin and Mary Jo Gheens, who are depicted here. And since that time, for over the past, 70 some odd years, they've distributed over up to $150 million for educational purposes here in the Jefferson County or Metro Louisville region. And donate a lot of money. So where did all that money come from, you say? How did they get that? Well, when you read this, it says they owned a ranch that was rich in mineral resources. I wonder what that means. What rich mineral resources would have been on a ranch in Louisiana? Well, out one day they were looking for some food, and up through the ground came a bubbling crude. Oil, that is. They discovered oil in their ranch down in Louisiana. By the way, they owned that ranch to grow sugar cane for their candy company. They owned Bradis and Gheens Candy Company is where that came from. So if you're wondering where all that happened at, here's New Orleans right here where the Super Bowl was recently at, and Gheens, Louisiana is right there, which I think they still own. I think Gheens still owns that. So again, like I said, they were in the Bradis and Gheens Candy Company, and this is Bradis and Gheens where it used to be down in the Smoketown area of Louisville, down Floyd and St. Catherine area, sort of where that's at. Charles Gheens, the father of Edwin Gheens, he's buried in a beautiful mausoleum there at Cave Hill. And a lot of people wonder, what do these mausoleums look like on the inside? Well, here's a picture of it here. There's a little stained glass up there and all. And I call these bunk beds on the sides. In for a long nap.
Yeah.
And then Charles and Mary Jo Gheens are buried in this other mausoleum back in the modern section of Cave Hill. A couple of different pairings of folks here. These are racehorses, Aladar and Affirmed. And in 1978, they were 1, 2, first and second place in all three of the Triple Crown races: Derby, Preakness, and Belmont. And Affirmed, of course, won the Triple Crown, all three of those races, but Aladar came in second. The only time that happened in the whole history of all that, horse racing. Another famous horse racing duel was Broker's Tip and Head Play, 1933 Derby. They called this the Fighting Jockey Derby. They battled, they were hitting each other as they came down the home stretch. Kind of classic photograph there. Okay, so Abraham and Mary Lincoln were the first couple of this presentation. There is one other presidential couple of Kentucky. Who might that be?
Zachary Taylor.
Zachary Taylor, yeah, the 12th president of the United States. But who was Zachary married to? Who was the first lady of the United States? A lot of Louisvillians or Kentuckians do not know. Do y'all know?
Mrs. Taylor.
Mrs. Taylor. Cheater.
Was he not married? Was that?
No, he was married.
Okay.
He was
I was
married.
like, I know there was like one single.
You thought I was pulling a fast one on you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, there was one that was not married. You're right. I forget who that is. But here you go.
Oh, Peggy.
Margaret Mackle Smith, Peggy Taylor, yes. She was the first lady of the United States. And she was in Maryland and moved to Louisville, married Zachary at age 21. They had 6 children. And most of those children, a number of those children are born here at the Taylor house off of Blankenbaker Lane, off Brownsboro Road there, near Indian Hills. There's a description of the historical marker in front of the house talking about them. This is some images of that inside of that house. It's very beautiful. It's one of the few privately owned presidential